My name is Sarah Naranjo, and this is my informative speech on Maria Montessori. Maria Montessori was born on August 31st, 1870 in Italy. She was a doctor and an educator. She aspired to be an engineer, despite that it was an uncommon career for women at the time. She graduated at the age of 20 with certificates from physics and mathematics, but when she graduated, she decided to study medicine instead, even though her father encouraged her to become a teacher. She broke barriers that constrained women's careers when she entered into the University of Rome and became the first woman of Italy to be accepted into a medical school. Before she was accepted, her entry was denied by the head of school. While in medical school, she had to work on her dissections alone because the classes couldn't be mixed at the time, so she didn't have it easy even though she had already gotten entered into the school. After she graduated, she immediately got a job at a hospital that was next to the university, and she was asked to represent Italy in the International Congress for Women's Rights in Berlin. From 1896 to 1901, Maria worked with children with some form of mental retardation, illness, or disability. She spent a lot of time thinking about ways that would stimulate their senses because she noticed that most of these children with disabilities were deprived of sensorial activities, which made their disabilities even worse. By the time that she stopped working with these children, when they were tested, their scores were at the same level as other children that were typically developing children. So they didn't have any problems and they were still scoring at about the same thing because of the activities that she implemented. By 1898, her work with the disabled children became more recognized, and she was asked to speak in the National Medical Congress in Turin. She was a big part of the National League of Education for Retarded Children. This led to her becoming a co-director of a school with Giuseppe Montesano, and it was called the Orthoprentice School. This school had children with broad spectrum of disabilities and disorders. Here is when Maria Montessori's professional identity shifted from a physician to an educator. She was finally able to put in practice all of her theories, and she spent 2 years experimenting and refining materials devised by Itard and Seguin, which were two Frenchmen who she studied their work on mental retardation earlier in her career. While she worked with Giuseppe Montesano, it also led to something else, and in 1898 she gave birth to her first and only child, Maria Montessori. Since she had a very busy career, she left him in the care of his family members, and she visited him often, although he didn't know that she was his mother until later on in his life. He eventually began to travel with her and collaborated in her work, and when she passed away, he took on her work and continued it. In 1901, she began another degree, which was in psychology and anthropology, and she stopped working at the Orthoprentice School and dedicated herself to these two studies. In 1907, she opened her first Casa del Bambino, which is the children's house, which is what it's called. Her classrooms are called. There was about 50 to 60 children, and it was in an apartment building for low-income families, and the ages were from 2 to 7 years old. The classroom had normal things like a blackboard and a teacher's desk, but it also had a cabinet with materials that she had developed herself using the work of these two Frenchmen that I mentioned. And the lessons included personal care, such as dressing and undressing and sweeping, things that are normal, common activities. By autumn 1908, Montessori's system had spread and there were 5 children houses open. So this was a year later. There was 4 in Rome and 1 in Milan. In 1909, she began giving training courses on her teaching method. She also published her first book, which was called The Montessori Method. When it reached the United States, it became number 2 on the nonfiction bestsellers list. By 1911, The Montessori education had been officially adopted in public school systems in Italy and Switzerland. And her methods also became more widespread when she began giving international trainings, starting in 1913. Between 1913 and 1936, Montessori was established in other countries such as France, Germany, Russia, Serbia, China, Japan. She made many trips to India and to other European countries where she continued her studies. Maria Montessori was also nominated for 6 Nobel Peace Prizes, but she never won. And by the 1950s, she had presented 29 international trainings all over the world and 9 international Montessori congresses. She died in the Netherlands in 1952 of a cerebral hemorrhage. Her work was continued by her son Mario and her granddaughter Renilde. Today, there are about 4,000 certified Montessori schools in the US and 7,000 around the world. So, as you can see, her method has spread all over the world and has continued to grow even after her death.